Welcome to the episode of the podcast From Stress to Success Blueprint. And I'm your host, Lolita Gooden. And today is a special episode because I have Karen Mays here with me. And why did I invite her for my podcast? Well, because she had a lifetime of emotional eating and poor self image, right? And she had to make a decision in 2015 because something had to change. And I think we all can relate that has to do with eating and stress. I know I can relate for sure. And she discovered that turned out, the problem was her. Well, problem's probably too big of a word, but something was in her life that she was causing it. And through the process of health journeying and weight loss and the ups and downs of life, Karen found her professional passion in coaching because we all know how important coaching is. And she has been able to go from problem solving, a creative life designer today, to coaching others on their health and happiness journeys and Karen's life's work. So her superpower is helping people discern healthy and unhealthy patterns, connect more authentically with themselves and others, and create alignment, space, and power in everyday life. So welcome, Karen, to my podcast.
Thank you, Lolita. It's so good to be here.
I'm sure when I just start saying emotional eating, a lot of people said, "Oh, I already know what it is," and I can tell you that when I feel like I need a little pickup, I just go to my potato chips and I laugh. I say I'm a high achiever, so when I open a bag and sometimes it's the family size, I just eat the whole thing until I'm done with that.
I can't relate to that at all.
So, would you mind sharing a little bit what happened in 2015 and why you decided that you need to make a change?
Yeah, so in 2015, I was just at a point where, even as someone who struggled always, like I always from back, I can remember in kindergarten feeling like the bigger kid and kind of embarrassed and self-conscious. And that would vary a little bit as I went through my childhood and young adulthood. But after I had my kids, I didn't lose the baby weight. I have two boys, and after my first one, I didn't really lose the baby weight. In fact, I just gained more. And then I had my second son. And so I just got to this place, and I got to this place where I didn't even recognize myself. Like I'd always been big and I always felt like I had an issue with weight, but I felt like I could dress myself in a certain way and feel pretty good about it and carried it well. And but in 2015 that wasn't the case. And my back was hurting. And the worst part was I'm looking at these two little kids. My boys were 4 and 2 at the time. And I'm like, these are awesome boys. I have an awesome husband. And yet I'm like, I can't wait to take my next nap. And I don't know how I'm just trying to get through the day. And I didn't like that, and I didn't have the energy to, be the kind of mom that I really wanted to be and just enjoy the life that I had. So, I was really at a point where I felt like I had tried all the things and there wasn't anything I wanted to go back to. I had been trying different things on my own and I was just really, really discouraged and didn't know what to do. So, I actually, was sitting at a red light one day and I just was I wished for a billboard. That was like where my brain went amazing. Maybe I'll see a billboard for something that I don't know about yet. And that'll be the thing. Because I'd started going back to the gym and I was feeling a little better from that. So I had enough energy to like I started to think about, okay, I know I need to work on my eating habits. Um, but I don't know how I'm going to go about it because I know so many things. I've done so many diets. I've learned a lot, but I can't seem to put it all together in a way that makes sense for me. So that's
So,
kind of
did
where
you
I
see that
was.
billboard? Did you see that billboard? What was that?
What didn't end up being a billboard, it ended up being a Facebook post from someone that I knew through networking. So I love networking. That's how you and I met too. Um, but a networking friend I hadn't spoken to in probably 10 years. And I had moved across the country since then. And we weren't really in touch, but we were connected on Facebook. And she put up a post. And I was like, oh, what's that about? And so I reached out to her and decided to give it a try. Um, and that was the beginning. of, okay, I'm gonna try one more time, and this time I'm gonna have a coach.
What was the most stressful thing about you really having this new goal?
So so I ended up losing over 100 pounds, but I didn't start out with that goal. My first goal was I just want to feel better. And I said to my coach, her name is Nora, I said, if I lose about 50 pounds, I'll start to recognize myself again. That's somewhere I've been before and been for a significant amount of time. And so that was really my initial goal. But once I got going and I was down a good, maybe 30 pounds or something like that, I realized that this was something I was gonna be able to go farther than that. And but yeah, I since I didn't start out with that like hard goal, I was or really defined goal, I um remember I was kind of like I was exhilarated because it was going so well when I got started, right? It was about this time of year. I just had my 9-year anniversary of starting my journey. Um, so it was this time of year, and I was like, so fast forward, to maybe 3 months from now. I'm not sure exactly when this was, but I had this conversation with my coach, and I'm like, I did the math, and I said I'm doing really well, but I did the math, and like if I really want to go like to pass the 100-pound mark, this is still going to take a long time. And I'm like, I'm a little discouraged. I'm a little like overwhelmed by the length of time that it's going to take, even though I'm happy. And my coach said, let's just focus on the next 10 pounds. And she redirected me. She said, what's something that has nothing to do with the scale that you want to do? And and I thought about that, and I came up with kayaking, which was I wasn't incapable of kayaking at the time, but I didn't feel comfortable about it. And so it was winter, so it must have been like January, and because I remember it wasn't the season yet, and so I started researching, and I found a group, and I'm like, okay, in the spring, I'm gonna join this group. And I literally went, I'm very visual. I love visual reminders and cues. So I printed out pictures of women. I found one on the internet. I found pictures of women kayaking, and I printed them out, and I had one on the fridge. I had one in my bedroom, but one in the mirror. Like, so I was surrounded by reminders of what I was working toward.
I love those visual reminders. I heard that it works also to put a very inspirational image on the refrigerator, especially those who just love coming and eating from refrigerator or pantry door. What was the hardest thing and was to change in your life when you got on that diet?
Um, well, as I've learned, it's not a diet, it's a lifestyle. Well, but the what was the hardest thing? Well, the great thing about it is that it was very simple. And so the hardest thing was noticing all the times when my mind would go to, oh, but I want to eat something else. Oh, but I was so committed that I was it wasn't hard because I was that committed, but it was really I wasn't aware before of all the ways that my mind was constantly going to food. Like, oh, this happened. It was like, when the doctor hits your knee to test your reflexes, like something would happen, like, oh, food. Oh, food. And suddenly being aware of that all the time, suddenly it was very clear what had been going on for so many years. And but probably the hardest thing was learning I mean, just tactically, um, all the different meals that it was a good experience. But so what I did, and I don't, I share this with clients all the time, but I don't necessarily recommend going this route. But I just kept it so simple for myself. I ate the same dinner 6 days a week for probably 3 months. Chicken over salad, chicken over salad, chicken over salad. And then I was tired. I'm not a big fan. Like I just maxed out on chicken over salad. Like I'll eat it, but it's never like something I'm excited about anymore. But what I loved was the simplicity, and I knew I was on track, and I could put it together very easily. And I needed that simplicity at the time. And then, but once I did kind of max out on it, then it was time to go in search of other options. And so, learning how to kind of add to um my book, my recipe book, I guess, of options that I can use, day in and day out, that are going to keep me where I want to be, keep me feeling good, um, and not getting overwhelmed by that.
I love that, and I also can relate because I live alone and I love cooking. So there's some dishes I make, and it's like a pot of soup, and then I eat like every dinner for 5 days, and I'm like, okay, I'm done with that. I'm ready to move on. But I know exactly how many calories I get. Not like calories, but I know it's something healthy, and I can eat that. I have a question. So when you mentioned that sometimes you will get that hit of like, oh my gosh, food, I want to go and eat something, would you replace to eat something healthy? Like, because I know when I got on my healthy journey like 3 years ago, and I got myself a coach, she recommended for me to have like in my purse, like, carrots or stick of
Mhm.
celery or something, that if I feel like, oh my gosh, I really need to eat something, I'll just grab something healthy. Did you do something similar, or was something different?
Yeah. So with the program that I coach, it's called Optavia. So I'm an Optavia coach. And so my clients, and just like I was and still do, eat every 2 to 3 hours. Um, so yeah, you do want to have something so that one of the big benefits of that is that it leads to, once you're used to it, you tend not to be hungry as long as you're continuing to fuel your body throughout the day in a balanced way, which is what we're doing. Um, so yeah, I was definitely replacing a lot of what I was um eating otherwise with these things that were on the program. We call them fuelings. And but to answer your question about like when I would have a particular moment of emotional eating or feeling stressed or overwhelmed, the go-to is drink some water. I am almost never without, I almost always have water in arm's reach, but and then I found that it would pass. What I learned about cravings specifically is that they would pass after about 15 minutes, usually, sometimes less. And so knowing that really empowered me to, slow down, drink the water. I would usually honestly go distract myself, like say, okay, for 10 or 15 minutes, I'm going to go do this other thing out of the kitchen, because, you have young kids, you're in the kitchen a lot. But I would go do something outside of the kitchen, and I would, go about it that way. Distraction is probably my number one kind of tactical thing to go to. Um, and I was amazed that like 10 or 15 minutes later, I would check back in with myself. So I'm like, oh, it's gone. Like I really didn't need it. But when I like say it was time to prepare a meal or something and I needed to be in the kitchen, then I would replace that. I would usually sip on tea. So tea is a big one for me. I like hibiscus herbal tea, or ginger tea are big ones for me. That's something I can sip on and enjoy. And if it's summertime, it's going to be iced hibiscus tea for me. So that's a real go-to, and I love sparkling water. So we have a soda stream, and I'll have sparkling water. Kind of that's like if I kind of just want us to switch it up from regular water, I have that. So those are kind of, does that answer your question?
Oh yes, absolutely. I think we all should have a list of things that can help us with that moment when we're feeling like we need to eat something when we shouldn't be eating. I want to ask you, and like in my coaching, I think it's I recommend my clients to have some sort of a reward system.
Hmm.
Reward yourself, and you know appreciate yourself for your own progress, because I think it's very important to realize how far already went. It's kind of like a mountain. When you you keep climbing and climbing and climbing. You think, oh my gosh, I'm not there yet. I'm not. When I'm gonna get there? And it can get very disheartening, and we can run out of patience. And I multiple times did that. But it's very important to kind of look back and say, hey, I already went that far, and it's important to acknowledge that, hey, you did it. Like, you need to reward yourself. But with rewards, I know with a lot of clients, it will be when I ask them, I said, okay, what is your reward, that you want to give it to yourself, like at the end of a month, by if you already achieved your goals. There are many of them, they say, oh my gosh, I'm going to have a piece of chocolate cake or whatever, and then somehow is always associated with food. And
Mm.
because it gives us comfort, and reminds us of some different memories. But now I'm thinking, let's say you change the lifestyle. We're not talking anymore about there's no diet, it's a lifetime change. They're like, how? Okay, so if the food is not a reward, and what reward you will recommend? But specifically, I want to ask you, did you rewarded yourself, and what was it?
So it's important to me to still be able to enjoy food and drink, right? So yeah, so that cup of tea with a maybe a particular fueling or a particular food that I really enjoy, especially if I'm feeling low energy, like, and it's partly the food, but it's really the moment to slow down. And so kind of the big thing for me has been noticing what the real reward is. And what the real reward for me oftentimes is a moment to slow down and be kind of recenter myself. Um, but yeah, you're so right. It's important, and this is something that comes up a lot, to have a rewards system. So for my clients, for my female clients, sometimes it'll be something like a spa day or a manicure pedicure. It might be, might be buying flowers for yourself. It can be a lot of different things. It could be going out to a restaurant. But it is important to identify non-food rewards. I know for myself, like I went through lots of different things where I would say, "Oh, I'm gonna on my birthday, I'm gonna have this because it's, and for me that was not a healthy thought pattern. If that works, I'm a fan of what works, and I think there are healthy and unhealthy ways to think about a lot of different things. Um, but the kind of the place where that went in my brain didn't work. So I'm a big fan of just looking at food as food, and there aren't bad foods or good foods. There are foods that lead us more towards health and foods that don't, and kind of evaluating and making choices based on that information. Because sometimes when we attach like this is a bad food or my guilty pleasure, like there's its own kind of reward system built in there, like I'm being bad. So if we can kind of unplug that, I think that's really helpful for a lot of people who identify themselves as emotional eaters or stress eaters. It's unplugging that charge. I think of it like a charge that comes with those eating choices. And you know what? I'm not perfect. It's not like I went on this journey and I never ate out of emotion or stress again. I definitely have. And so the journey has really been learning how to look back at myself without, as much as possible, without judgment, and figuring out and learning from the experience so that I can now make a more informed choice next time. Because a lot of it for me has been learning how to go upstream. Like when I remember having a moment where I was like, oh, this moment, this thing that's happening right now that's causing me to want to eat whatever it was. I don't remember what it was, to have this episode of just eating. For me, I would do a lot of it in the car. Because it was like me time. My kids were even littler back then. It's like, this is my me time in the car. I think a lot of of secret eating goes on in the car. And I just had this moment. I'm like, this actually started like yesterday. That's when the emotions and stress started building up. And so that was a big moment, because then I'm like, okay, so when that happens again, maybe I can catch it before it gets this far, right? So it just really, it's self-awareness, is what it comes down to, and learning through that process. It was a long answer to a short question.
No, I will take any details, because I think the more we know, the more we can relate, and also we can start applying things that fits us better.
Hmm.
And so I'm very appreciative that you sharing all of this. So okay, so what my next question is, so when you caught yourself that okay, now you, because you're stressed out, you're eating something, and then you're like, okay, I should not be eating. So how you will soothe yourself, how you will help yourself to get out of that stressful situation. I know you mentioned before this that you will just say, oh well, that craving is gonna pass, but did you just kind of stopped yourself, there's just called and said, I'm not going to stress, forget about this? Or did you use some other stress techniques to help you out in that?
Well, sometimes I would go ahead and do it, right? And like, okay, now moving on. And but what I started to notice was that there were more and more times where I could not get there. I could avoid getting to that place. And the really the very early where the foundation was laid for that was in my coaching calls with my coach. Because she would always ask me, okay, what are we celebrating? What went well this week? And I mean, I think probably for the first couple months, I was never ready for that question because I was like, wait, what went well? God, I would have to think really hard. And then finally I clued in. I'm like, okay, she's gonna ask me what went well, so I better think about what went well. And that wasn't really the beginning of me looking for the wins and looking for what did go well, even when it felt like because I was so wired for feeling like I had never done well enough. And so starting to sort of untie that knot was a big, big deal for me. Um, but the times to successfully navigate kind of what I would call an acute moment of stress where you're like, I'm gonna go do it, is if you can catch yourself and have a moment of, well, what if I didn't? What else would I do? And just allowing, if I can find the space to do that, and like, okay, what if I didn't? What would be another thing that's gonna bring me relief? And for some, and sometimes, and so I don't know if you know this, Lilita, but there's a great graphic, and I don't know who came up with it, but it's amazing. It says BLAST on it, and it's an acronym, and it stands for bored, lonely, angry, stressed, and tired. And so am I hungry or am I blast? And so a lot of it was actually stopping and figuring out what I actually was, because I just had this like bunch of emotions all balled together, and I wouldn't even know. I just kind of labeled it overwhelmed or stressed. And so kind of digging in enough to figure out that I was overwhelmed because I was angry or I felt out of control of my time. A lot of the time for me, it was I felt out of control of my time. I felt like something or someone else was controlling my schedule, and felt like I was victimized by it in a way. And so it was breaking that down and figuring out where my power was really. And so it's really that it's like slowing down and going into the matrix. Okay, what's going on here really? And it doesn't, once you get used to it, it doesn't take that long, but it took a while. It took a while for me to start to be able to identify and naming the emotion. I'm sad. What am I sad about? Oh, I'm sad because I argued with my husband or something like that. I said something I wish I hadn't said. Um, and then the opportunity is to actually address that thing. I can go apologize. Um, but for me, it often was the lie I would tell myself is that I was alone. And so establishing connection, which might mean just texting my husband, calling my husband, if he's home, talking to my husband, reaching out to my coach, going on Facebook, looking in the community that we have for our health clients, maybe sharing or maybe just looking for some positive reinforcement. Um, but that was another way for me to connect. So that's kind of like that's my go-to. And I think that happens for a lot of people is we start to isolate where we feel isolated. Our brain tells us you are uniquely challenged. No one understands. And this is super hard just for you. And what I've learned is that I'm not actually alone. And so kind of finding ways to remind myself of that.
Well, that is wonderful that you were that strong that allowed yourself to seek help. I know there are some people that they think asking for help can look like a weakness, and it's like, oh no, 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 I'm have to struggle with this myself, even if I know there are some people that can help me. But I'm afraid that if I will not do it by myself, then other people around me, a family or business or whatever, they will look at me like, oh, I couldn't make it. So I really salute you for really taking that in your hands and saying, no, I deserve to do this for myself, and I'm not alone. I will really reach out, because some people can feel ashamed of reaching out and acknowledging that in themselves. I
Thank
want to
you.
ask you. When you were growing up, did you talk about, when your family members, were you taught how to manage stress, and you were talking about your emotions?
Gosh, that's a great question. I would say no, at least not in a way that I can remember or articulate. I mean, of course, we learn by looking at the people around us, but I don't think it was more about this is how it was about character, I think, and this is how we behave because we are people of good character. But in terms of, managing, discouragement or failure or anything like that, um, no, I don't think so. It wasn't discussed.
I found that it's very common that those things are not really being discussed. We just kind of learn from how people around us managing or not managing. Did you have a diary that you were writing how you feel and how your day went?
I did. I don't know how consistent. I definitely had times when I would write many, many pages. Yes. And yes. And I was always terrified that somebody would find them.
My handwriting was always so bad that even if they will find it, they couldn't read it. I remember when I was in college, I would make notes, because I was this great student. I always sit up front and write all my notes. But the professor will speak so fast that I will be like, okay, well, I wrote it down, but I cannot even read it
You couldn't
myself,
even
what he
read
said.
it.
Well, that's great. So, I wanted to ask you now, talking about changing the lifestyle that has to do with, how we move, what we eat, and I know that we get bombarded with so much with algorithms on our social media and friends of coming up with all the new things that just came up, like and if I look for some recipe, I mean, I immediately get bombarded with like, hey, this is a new diet, eat
Mm.
apples, don't eat apples. You need to have oil, don't eat oil. Tomatoes are good for you. No, tomatoes are bad for you. And I think when I started looking into how I can slim up and get in better in shape, I read all kinds of things that were really contradicting each other. And I think as a stress management coach, when I say, hey, stress management should not be so stressful, and one of the things that I always say that we need to start with the body, and we need to make sure we're eating nutritious food and we move enough and we sleep enough, and all of this that really just a maintenance to our body. It can get very stressful when somebody decides to say, okay, I'm going to change my life now, but you have all bombardment with all of those things. Of course, I had a friend who was a coach, and she said, hold on, I can tell you, this is
Mm.
what you need to do, this is what worked for me. But let's say, what would you recommend to somebody who's listening right now and they're like, well, what do? I don't have a friend who can recommend me that I can trust what they
Mm.
should do with among all the sea of amazing diets and lifestyle opinions.
Well, I've been there. And so, for one thing, someone could do is they can reach out to me. I would be happy to have a conversation, free consultation, whatever you want to call it, with anybody who feels like that. Um, but a big theme for me at the moment, and you're so right. Like I think we all get overwhelmed. We're in that information age where there's so much of it. And but even before the internet, I felt that way. And it's what I'm learning is listening. There's so many voices that I need to remind myself to listen to my voice first. My voice needs to be the loudest. And I remember standing in the grocery store and I think I was on a clean eating thing. This is before 2015, before my journey. And I was like, okay. I was looking at 2 jars of mayonnaise. Like, I don't even eat mayonnaise anymore. But at the time, I was looking at 2 jars, and one was made with olive oil and one was low fat. And I was having a crisis. I couldn't, like, do I want the olive oil that's like a healthier fat or do I want the low fat? I'm like, I don't know. And it was just, and I don't remember what I ended up deciding because at the time the narrative was low fat. You want low fat. And so it is dizzying. I mean, even in my own lifetime, I turned 50 this year. Like, there's eggs are good, eggs are bad, coffee's good, coffee's bad, fat is good, fat is bad. It is dizzying. So, um, I think keeping it simple and noticing what's true for you. The truth is, okay, a lot of people like to avoid gluten. They feel better without gluten. Is that true for me? Um, similar with dairy, and I am not a nutrition expert. What I have gotten really good at, though, is getting into the specifics with people about what works for you, and noticing that, and then staying flexible, mentally flexible, and talking about like um, being curious, like, oh, okay, so. Now, I don't know what it is now, if eggs are good or bad, but let's just say, for example, currently, oh, eggs are bad for you. Stay away from the yolks. And okay, does that feel true for me? Well, and also some trusted resources, like you got to identify your resources, but then make your voice the loudest, the one that you're listening to the loudest. And yeah, because there's a lot of information out there, and you can find some kind of information to support a lot of different stuff. And so it comes back to, okay, what works for me? What really matters? And what are the big things? I think that was a big thing for me too, is I thought it all had to matter equally. But what really matters the most for me?
When I started on my health journey, I realized there were two things that were a little different that I approached. One, I took a test to see what my body is allergic to, because
Mm,
somebody can say, "Oh, dairy is very good because it has so much protein and all of this," and then when I took the test, it showed that I was um, intolerant to gluten and dairy. And then when I
mm,
was talking with my mom, I said, "Oh, well, turn out that I'm not good with dairy." And my mom said, "Oh, yeah, I could tell you that myself because when you were a baby, you would
mm.
not be want to be even fed anything that is white." And I was like, "Oh, so we do have this inner feeling, like how that makes me feel when I want to eat this. Do I want to eat this? Would I don't want to eat this?" So I really I appreciate what you share. That is very important to listen to their own body, and because I think we are all very different. Of course, human body is not like, but it is we similar, but at the same time we're very different, because also we have different digestion bacteria living and whatever. It depends on our stress levels, depends on also many things, also the location where we live, the air we breathe, and the water even, and all of this. And the second thing that also it was surprising, and also it made so much sense to me. So when I started working with my coach, she said that I definitely need to go work out and I need to do exercises, and there was so much of, every time when I'll read something, there will be this hype of, "Oh, you need to exercise the first thing in the morning." And
Mm.
I would be like, "Well, that's just not me. I like to sleep in. I barely even awake in the morning. Like, I cannot do this." And then also, other people say, "Oh, you wake up and then you go meditate." I'm like, "What are you talking about? I'm fall asleep. I go back to sleep." And I was like, "What's wrong with me?" And a few years back, I came across, and I want to hear, do you know about this? It's called "What's Your Animal Chronotype?" It's from a sleep doctor. Have you heard of that one?
No.
So I'm obviously not affiliated, but for those who are listening in, you can go to find something on Google that says "What's my sleep animal?" something like this. And so basically, there are four types. So you answer the questions, and it has to do a lot of like your sleep patterns, your eating habits, and things like that. And it turned out that there are four types. There's like a bear, wolf, lion, and dolphin. And I turn out to be a wolf. And wolf, like, imagine the animal Wolf sleeps in late. That's my natural way of my how my body operates. So working out or meditating in the morning, that's not me. So then it says that wolf can stay longer hours without eating. That's why for me doing 16-hour fasting, it works great because naturally my body doesn't want to eat when I wake up. And then I can stay very late hours into, I go to sleep like at midnight and I feel great. The most productive time for me, what so much of writing I did and all this creative stuff I do is really done in the late hours. But majority of people, about 80%, are the bears that they wake up early in the morning, then they want to eat right away, and then they start kind of energy going down towards evening, and they want to go to sleep by 9 or 10. When I was talking with my coach, and she's obviously was not the wolf type, she was like a bear type, and she was like, "No, you need to do this in the morning." When I showed her this test, and I said, "How about in order for me to stress myself, how I can connect this, me as a stress management coach, managing my own stress and getting into healthy habit." I realized that it's very important to know what is our natural tendencies are. And
Mm,
so when I realized, like, hey, I need to follow my rhythm, and since I'm a wolf now, is I got validated. It was nothing wrong with me. I got validated that there are other people, like we said, there are other people like that, like me. And so I was great in doing fasting for 16 hours. I eat dinner at 7 and I will not eat until like 11 in the morning. I will sleep as long as I could, but then I would work out at later hours. My workout time was from 9:30 to 10 p.m. And when I will tell other people, they're like, "Are you kidding me? This is when I go to bed." But for me, being a wolf, I realized that this is what worked well for me. And so I think when I talk about, about stress management and the healthy living, I think my approach is find something that works for you, and see what are your waking up hours, when is it you're hungry, and all of this, and that way it will be easier to change that lifestyle.
I love that. And I love that you chose to, really own that. And I think that what happens for a lot of people, myself included for many years, and a lot of the people I work with, is we're trying to fit into somebody else's model of how things should be. And sometimes we don't even know that we're doing it to ourselves. And so I love that you freed yourself from that, and just, yeah, it comes back down because so many of us are trying to chase this Pinterest. I'm a Pinterest mom. And it's just, that's just not me, right? I am not, the mom who's like making meals from scratch every night. Like, I'm just not. I don't hate cooking, but that's not that's not who I am. And owning that, finally I was like, this I took this weight off of my shoulders. Like, okay, I don't need to try to be farm to table mom anymore. It's okay to, sometimes, and I'm going to make the best choices for my family that I can, without trying to be something I'm not. And so I think I love that. Yeah, that's so important.
So I want to ask you, since you have a lot of clients that you coach through all of this journey, what is the part that usually your clients stress the most?
A lot of times it is actually, leaving the weight loss phase. We're so, used to being in this diet mindset that, and then for people who have struggled for a long time, I'm generalizing here, but like, you get comfortable in the weight loss phase. And so when it's time to exit that, and we have a transition plan and we stay together, it's not like people reach their goal and like, bye. No, we usher people all the way through. Um, that gets stressful, for people. So it's the newness. Sometimes it's unfamiliar territory. It's reintroducing some foods that you haven't been for a while and managing those choices. There's some simplicity in the weight loss phase because you know exactly what you're trying to do, and the lines are pretty clear. Um, and so when you start to introduce more, options, more choice, it can feel overwhelming, just the idea of it. But that's why I'm a big believer, obviously, being a coach and having a coach. And and engaging in, because there's so much support. And also one thing I've learned, Lolita, is like from now that I'm hanging out with people who have maybe they don't come from the same place that I came from, and like there are people I would have looked at and said, oh, it's easy for them. And so now having, a little bit of a closer view of what their lives are like, and they share with me because they share with me, and we do that with each other, and they learn from me too. I'm like, oh, it's easy because they've been practicing. And also, it's not always easy. It takes a certain amount of effort and work. And so that was one of the big things I had to let go of, was that I was going to be like done and it was going to be easy street at some point. But I think I think there's a certain kind of routine that goes into like, okay, I'm in diet mode. I know what to do here. And I think that sometimes psychologically, I'm not a therapist, but I think that there's something there for that's why people sometimes never end up reaching the goal because it's like I know how to it gives you something to do almost. But if someone's willing to go there, let's keep working and get to a place where I think real freedom is on the other side.
I know I had a great and I want to recommend those who are listening in to book a session with Karen because definitely you can benefit with so much clarity about everything that she does. But I remember I had a great session with you about focus and habits, and with any change of life could be nutrition, life change, or a career change, or anything like that. Any goal that we have it could be very stressful to change anything, especially because it says the habits that are doing right now and your actions that you're taking, and they're giving you some specific results. If you continue doing the same thing, you will end up with the same results. So tell me, what you can recommend someone who is afraid to set new goals?
Mm, do it anyway. Um, Afraid to, that's such a good question. Um, Once you know why something is really important, and this can take a little bit of work that often includes journaling about it, which, a lot of us resist doing. But however you get there, um, having that connection, like you can imagine, we can all imagine the scenario where you go to the doctor and the test comes back and it's something scary, like you got to get into action or else this is coming your way. And all of a sudden everything's in clear focus. I need to go do this. And so the challenge can be like, okay, I'm not there, thank goodness that news hasn't come. How do I get that focus, that clarity of that? What it is, it's connection. And so there's a great website that's very simple. You can also just do it on a piece of paper, and it's about connecting to why something's important to you. And what it is, you just write, what do I want to do at the top? And then the number one is, why is that important to me? And you gotta write, why is that important to me? And a couple sentences, not a whole essay, because you're going to do that 7 times. And then so question number two is, why is that important to me? So why is the thing that you wrote at number one important? And you do that 7 times. You really do it as many times until you get to the reason that is so connected to your emotions that like, oh, I gotta go do this right now. Like I'm not waiting till Monday, like now. And and it brings that sharp focus, because when something's important, like for parents, like if your kid is sick, like all of a sudden nothing else matters, you can shut everything off and you know exactly what to do. And so it's kind of arriving at that level of connection of why, because your health is that important, but we're just so used to putting it off and putting it off. And then so it's possible to intervene before you get to that moment of like you got to do something or else. And so I think 7 levels deep is such a great tool for that, connecting to why it matters.
Oh, I love that. To be honest, I never heard of that one. But it sounds a little bit similar, except just the total opposite. The way I work with clients, I ask them when they say, "Oh, I'm doing this and this," and I say, "Okay, and how is that serving you?" And usually there's a lot of resentment, maybe even anger. It's like, what do you mean? Like, for example, being overweight is like, I will say, well, how is that serving you? And you're like, of course it's not serving me. What are you talking about? But I think we all, it's all about survival. And so we will do things even harming ourselves, but in order to survive. And there's a lot of this emotional, underlay, and it has to do with the, childhood wounds and how we see ourselves and what we think we deserve, that even somebody can keep that way just to, because it help them to feel safe and secure, or seen, or have attention, or all kinds of ways. So I really appreciate you telling me this step, because I think when I ask somebody, well, how is this serving you for you to be in this position, that can, some can not take it well, and it can really be pullback. So I really love your what you gave the advice, and I can start using this for my clients, of saying like,
Ah.
okay, so going not from really going and bulldozing yourself into, oh my gosh, now I'm going to jump off the cliff, but just kind of like going through the inspiration. And I think it's very important for us to all realize that self-help and self-love is very needed, not only for ourselves, but for all of us around, for our family, for business, anyone that we're interacting with, because we cannot really pour out of the empty pitch. And we all talk about that. It's like, yeah, I heard this, but it's like, but you really need to start with simple things to really give yourself that self-care. Do you have any few tips that you can tell listeners how you do your self-care? Do you have a routine?
Oh, I have so many routines. And I change them. I like a certain amount of novelty, but one that I've instituted in the last few months that I've noticed, it's like I just makes me happier. My Where my office is also my bedroom. So I now have a an essential oil diffuser, and I found the scents that I love. And so just having that going a few times throughout the day, when I leave the room and I come back in, I'm like, ah, and it just makes me feel like I'm so happy to be here and I can sit down and work with like a really nice, refreshed attitude. Um, so that's something really simple that I do. My number one tip, actually, if somebody's sleep is out of alignment, is to work on your sleep habits. Because and I know that's something a lot of people struggle with, but whatever you can do to create some structure and rest in your day, and a structure around rest in your day, because it sets you up to make much better choices. For me, I went about it organically. It wasn't like, now I'm going to tackle my sleep habits. But what I found was on the I would have the habit of staying up late. My kids would go to sleep and I would sit up and watch movies or whatever I was doing. At this point, I was on my health journey, so I wasn't eating like I maybe would have in the past, but I would stay up way too late, not doing anything productive. Not that that would matter anyway, but and I realized that when I did the next day, when I had done that, I would feel terrible naturally, and I would be much more tempted to eat, and I would be dealing with a lot more triggers to emotionally eat, or just eat. Like I felt like, oh, if I eat something, I'll probably have more energy and I'll feel like I can keep going. And so I was like, well, this is really starting to become just so prevalent that it's distracting. I thought, well, I'm gonna let myself fall asleep with the kids and not get up. Like, so when they go to sleep, I'm going to sleep. And I started to do that more often than not. And I just can't tell you how transformative that was. I like I'm someone who never woke up feeling rested to suddenly like, oh, I actually feel like I got a decent night's sleep. I'm ready to do. I am not a morning person, so I never like spring out of bed at like, yeah, let's go get this day. But I feel like I'm ready for a day, and I'm happy to get up and get started. Um, and it just gives you so much more space to make those better choices and more bandwidth to handle stress, to handle the things that life throws at us every single day. So that's my number one self-care thing. If that's out of alignment with somebody at some point, that's got to be addressed. Um, and other than that, moving my body, I read a book, was it last year or the year before, called The Joy of Movement, and that really helped me move forward in my mindset around exercise. I was what I would call an obligatory exerciser for my entire life. You know, it was kind of me trying to do what everybody else seems to be doing and works for them, and I should be someone who enjoys that, and I would enjoy certain things about it, but anyway, through reading that book, it opened my mind to it prompted me to notice that I was actually enjoying not just the completion of exercise, but the process of it. And that has my resistance to doing it has gone like way, way down. And so moving my body, and then I got to notice that, oh, just 10 minutes of getting my heart rate up really changes my energy level. And so now these things kind of add up. And so now I can just add that and like, okay, maybe I don't have an hour. Do I have 10 minutes? Um, and I can go get some sun, go for a walk around the block, or just get my heart rate up somehow. So moving my body is it's become a non-negotiable um, in some way. I'm not going hardcore, but I would say at least 4 days a week I'm doing something significant. Right now it's Pilates. Like I said, I do switch things up. So I was doing row house classes for a long time. Now I'm over doing Pilates, which is very different, but great in other ways. Sometimes it's walking a lot. So those are kind of my thing. But whatever the old saying is, what's the best form of exercise? It's the one you will actually do. So, but it's really that awareness. So that's been a big one for me. Sleep and exercise. It's rocket science over here.
So I was about to ask you about, and maybe that's actually you already answered, because I was just wondering. So somebody's who's listening in, and they're like, well, I don't really need to think about my body now, and I don't really want to change much of my life, because you know how it is. I don't have time for this, and all those changes are so scary. And well, I don't have really a diagnosis from my doctor that I already scared myself into that I need to change my life, and I don't have time. But is there just one thing you can tell that somebody who's listening in now could change in their life that is not so stressful, but uh,
Hmm.
will make a difference in their life?
Hmm. Well, I think it would depends who this person is and what their life is like. But I mean, one thing you can't go wrong with is eating more vegetables. I think we could eat more vegetables. But the truth is, if somebody doesn't want to change, then don't. I mean, one of the requisites for change is that you have to want it. And I'm not here to convince anybody to do anything that they don't really want to do. Now, sometimes people want to change, but there's a lot of baggage or whatever, or logistical issues or past failures that are kind of getting in the way. But at the core, they want it, right? But see, somebody has to want it. I'm not in the business of going up to people and saying, you should really change. Your life could be better. Um, but if somebody's thinking about it, I would say there's something there. And so if I were to prescribe anything to anybody who's thinking, I mean, I've become a real personal development junkie. And so I would say start reading some personal development books, or listening to personal development podcasts, like this one, and and see what comes up, see what you find out. It could be that maybe there's something there and you're not letting the inspiration in. And so, you know, I think if someone's even thinking about it, there's something there, right?
Well, I could add that for those who already got inspired just by listening to us talking, they should stop the search, and they should just book a session with you, because obviously you already went through the whole journey. And I love you're not pushing someone to do something categorically, like you have to do this. I love your approach, how you say someone needs to do it if they're really inclined to do and change. And so for those who are listening in and you need more clarity, you're like, you know what, I think I'm ready for this journey, but you don't know what to do, what habits to implement. You have no idea what's working in your life right now, what doesn't. And as you know, by my calm process, you really need to eliminate things that don't work and start doing things that work. And Karen can help you totally with that. So for those who want to come and book you on or check out your things, where should they go?
The easiest place to go is probably coachkarenmaze.com, Karenmaze. And right right on there is the ability to book a chat with me or to email me. So that's probably the easiest way. I love to talk to people. I'm not attached to them deciding to become a client or not. Just anything. It's fun. I mean, this is why I do what I do, listening to people and giving, if people want my feedback, I am happy to help.
Well, thank you so much, Karen. That was a great conversation. I will leave all of those links and all the stuff, what else, the sources, definitely in the description below. And thank you so much for coming in and joining our show today.
Thank you. Oh, and I'll also send you, if anybody wants to download my free habit tracker, I'll give you the link to give to people for that, because it's a way to celebrate those wins. Every check mark is a victory, is what I say. So start checking off the wins.
I love it. And all that will be in the description below. Thank you,
Great.
Karen.